Hi, welcome to LearnStroke IAS classes by Arjun. You're listening to the Hindu News Analysis, Current Affairs for IAS News Leads with Arjun R Shankar. And today's date is 4th December 2022. Let's find out what are the important news leads and how they're very important for the civil service examination. The first important headline is Disenfranchised in Their Own Land. It's a story of a person who was a candidate in the 2020 election but was removed from the roles because she was a part of POK. So it's a story of Somia, who was a candidate in 2020. So she is asking, if POK is a part of India, then what is the problem in contesting? So this brings us to a very important area of what is POK. What is POK, or Pakistan occupied Kashmir? So you should know that the Pakistan occupied Kashmir is that part of Jammu and Kashmir which was invaded by Pakistan in 1947. The region is referred by the United Nations and other international organizations as Pakistani controlled Kashmir, or Pakistan administered Kashmir. So it was renamed as Pakistan occupied Jammu Kashmir by the Modi government, and the Pakistan occupied Kashmir is divided into two parts. One is the AJK, or Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and next is the Gilgit Baltistan, referred to as the northern areas till 2009, Gilgit Baltistan. So Defense Minister Rajnath Singh has previously quoted the 1994 Parliament resolution, which says that POK is a part of Indian territory and will continue to be so. So you should know that the POK has been under the illegitimate control of Pakistan since 1947, when tribal Lakshars, the Lashkars supported by Pakistan, invaded the princely state of J&K. And soon afterwards, the ruler of the state acceded to India. So this is a small history regarding that. So these questions are very important from the GS paper 2, the international relations perspective with Pakistan, and also governance related in the sense leading on to elections and redrawing the boundaries of India. So very important. So know about POK. Moving on to the next important area is a week more of electoral bond sales from tomorrow. So this again brings us GS paper 2, polity and governance. So you need to know what are electoral bonds, because the government has opened yet another long window for electoral bond sales. So what do you mean by electoral bond scheme? This was an electoral bond scheme was introduced in 2018 as an alternate to cash donation, to clean the system of political funding, because you know that every political party is being funded by people fund the party. So to bring a clarity on that, electoral bond scheme was introduced. And you should know that the article also talks about various aspects of representation of the People's Act. What do you mean by the representation of the People's Act? So you should know that according to the electoral bonds, State Bank of India is the only authorized to issue and encash these bonds. And what do you mean by the Representation of People Act 1950, Representation of People Act 1951? So it talks about the various aspects of country's electoral system. So very important for civil services. You need to know RPA. What are the important aspect of RPA? It's very important. Moving on to an important one regarding GS paper 1, history and culture. A plan to conserve centuries old vessel in Kerala. So this talks about the Kadakarapalli road in Kerala's Alappuzha, and it talks about a radiocarbon dating which was done in India, which revealed a ship. The wood used in the vessel or a ship was somewhere between 920 AD and 1160 AD. Another dating which was done in United States of America said that this was something between 1020 AD or 1160 AD. So it's a very old vessel that was found from Kerala. So important for GS paper 1, history and culture. Moving on to a very positive thing. In a first, Maharashtra sets up independent ministry for Divyang. So it is actually on the occasion of the International Day of Persons with Disability. This is a with Maharashtra has become the first state in the India to have an independent ministry for disabled people. Wow, that is a great initiative. So this is actually for catering the people with special physical and mental needs educationally and professionally. So Maharashtra is the only state, and the ministry will ensure the welfare of the persons with disabilities and effective implementation of various government schemes for them. So it's very important from the perspective of GS paper 2, government schemes, and especially for physically disabled and differently abled people. Moving on to the next is the efforts launched to broker the peace in Vilnius port area. So this needs to be known. GS paper 3 infrastructure, and you need to know from a current affairs perspective what is absolutely having in Vilnius port area in Kerala. The Vilnius project, which is known for its deep sea anchoring project. It's very strategic project that can change the face of India. So what is happening in the Vilnius port area? Why is there a violence happening? Is something that we have to know. Moving on, 55 natural food sources of the tribal population of the Dandakaranya region on its way to oblivion. This is a study. So this article talks about the various natural food sources of the tribal people and how the people eventually in the tribal areas have forgotten the old food sources, the traditional food sources of the tribal people. So in the course of time, they are forgetting this. So how can we protect the traditional food sources? So this also talks about a city, a small town called Konta. It is actually in Chhattisgarh, which is near to Andhra Pradesh. So where is Konta in Chhattisgarh, and where is Dandakaranya? The Dandakaranya is actually very old, and it is as old as Ramayana, because according to the Ramayana, it was home to many deadly creatures, Rakshasas, and demons. So Dandakaranya is actually extending over the Abujmar Hills in the western borders of the Eastern Ghats in the east. The Abujmar Hills in the western borders of the Eastern Ghats. The Dandakaranya region includes Chhattisgarh, Orissa, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh. So you should know that the people who are settling in the Dandakaranya forest blocks have adopted to various non-tribal food shops and arguably forgotten their traditional food methods. And they also talks about, the article also talks about a tribe called Muria tribe. The Muria tribe living in Chhattisgarh and Andhra Pradesh, which depends on 7 species of mushroom. So read this article from the perspective of GS paper 2 health and the tribal areas, etc. And they have also used a very special type of mushroom. So this was the important news. And moving on to the next important news was Kashmiri Files controversy. 3 IFF jurors back, lapid Indian members send differ. So nothing but the movie Kashmiri Files has been controversially treated. A lot of people, including famous filmmakers, suggesting that the film is nothing but a propaganda and a vulgar depiction. So, what is the reality? We have to know this from media, movies, etc., and how movies respond. So, GS paper 3, the role of media, which includes definitely movies, etc. And why is the movie making controversy? And according to the jury, they say that the platform is being used for politics and personal attacks in the movie. So do you agree? What is your opinion on that? Next is the navy puts on hold. It's a very important thing. And the navy puts hold on bigger aircraft carriers, repeat of Vikrant size vessel. So this whole article talks about nothing but the Navy has for now put on hold the plan for a bigger IC-8 IAC-2 or the indigenous aircraft carrier, the IAC-2, and is examining the possibility of a repeat order of a Vikrant size carrier, which was built indigenously as a part of the. So, what is IAC-2 and INS Vishal? So, this is the article. And what do you mean by CAT or Catobar or CATOBAR? How do you pronounce this? Catobar, and what do you mean by that? And Vishal, INS Vishal is also known as the Indigenous Aircraft Carrier 2 or IAC-2, which is a planned aircraft carrier to be built by the Cochin shipyard, and it is intended to be the second aircraft carrier to be built in India after INS Vikrant, which is IAC-1. So INS Vishal is IAC-2, and INS-1 INS Vikrant is IAC 1. And in this regard, what do you mean by EMALS Catobar system or electromagnetic aircraft launch system? So this Catobar, Navy had envisaged a Catobar. What do you mean by a catapult assisted takeoff but arrested recovery, or catapult assisted takeoff barrier arrested recovery? This is Catobar. This is a system used for the launch and recovery of aircraft from the deck of an aircraft carrier. So, under this technique, aircraft launch using a catapult assisted takeoff and landing on the ship using an arrestor wires. The system is very is costlier than the alternate methods, but it provides greater flexibility in carrier operation. So, it is a system used for the launch and recovery of aircraft from the deck of an aircraft carrier. So, know all this concept. What do you mean by Catobar and IAC 2, IAC 1, Arihant, and IAC 2, Vishal. GS paper 3, defense perspective. Know from very detailed perspective. And before we move on, as usual, I think I missed out one important news item, which was called regarding the audit of AIMS cyber systems. Because GS paper 3 technology, a recent cyber attack has crippled the servers and e-hospital service of the AIMS. So AIMS system was running on a software called Zimbra, which was specializing in the email services. So the vulnerabilities in Zimbra may be one of the reason why it was subjected to a massive hacking or a software or a ransomware affection. So the Delhi police has also registered a complaint. So this was the news regarding the AIM cyber system, which was talking about a software called Zimbra. So moving on, the Enforcement Directorate has seized more than 290 tons of betel nut. So what do you mean by betel nut or betel nut? So GS paper 2 or 3 crops, GS paper through crops. And what is this betel nut? Something very popular in the traditional systems. So what do you mean by that? The betel nut is the nut that comes from a plant called areca. The areca, it is sometimes used to make medicine, and betel nut is chewed alone in the form of quits, a mixture of tobacco, powder, or sliced betel nut and other ingredients. So it is basically chewed. Many people chew betel nut for the energy boost it produces, and this is likely due to the nut's natural alkaloids, which releases adrenaline. So it may also result in the feeling of euphoria and well-being. So people use it for chewing it, and it has got a lot of side effects also. So when you have a news like this, you should know what you mean by betel nut. So this is a crop, GS paper 3, uh, noted from that perspective. With a few takers, NFR cancels some Darjeeling toy trains. So this brings us GS paper 3, railways and infrastructure. What is the NFR, or Northeast Frontier Railways? The Northeast Frontier Railway is one of the 19 railway zones in Indian Railways. It is headquartered in Guwahati in Maligaon and responsible for operation and expansion of rail network all across northeastern states and some districts of eastern Bihar and northern West Bengal. So NFR takes care of the northern states, some districts of eastern Bihar and northern West Bengal. So this brings us another important area of what do you mean by a toy train. You know that there are different type of toy train operating in India, and one such toy train is the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway, or the DHR, is also the DHR or the toy train. It's a 600 millimeter 2 feet gauge railway that runs between the New Jalpaiguri and Darjeeling in the Indian state of West Bengal. It was actually built between 1879 and 1881, roughly almost 88 kilometers. So, very importantly, know about this toy train and Northeast Frontier Railway, or NFR. Moving on to a very important article regarding GS paper 3, it talks about the workforce in India, employment, and social security code. So it has got a very important aspect regarding what do you mean by what is the International Labor Organization, the ILO, and what is ARPM. So these are the important takeaways in this. What is ILO? What is Asia and the Pacific Regional Meeting, or APRM, which was recently conducted, which is happening in Singapore? And what is uh, the India's message in the APRM? India has put forward a recent message in the APRM. What is that? And what do you mean by fixed term employment, which has created a lot of controversy? So you should know ILO. What do you mean by ILO? ILO is nothing but an international organization, because ILO is a United Nations agency dealing with labor issues, particularly international labor standards, social protection, and work opportunity. It was established as an agency for the League of Nations, which followed by World War One. It was established by the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, and its founders of ILO had made great strides in social thought and action before the establishment of organization, and it became the first specialized agency of the United Nations in 1946. So ILO has four important objectives. One is to realize the standards and fundamental principles at right at work, create greater opportunities for women and men, enhance the coverage and effectiveness of social protection, and strengthen tripartism and social dialogue. These are some of the objectives of ILO. And what is India's message in the ARPM? This time the theme was social justice for a human centered recovery. So there are a lot of things, because India is actually on the path of becoming a 5 trillion economy by 2024-25, according to the Prime Minister. So India has put a lot of suggestions like strengthening employment surveys, creating job portals, and job portals to bridge the gap of job seekers and employers, a new map for employment growth, the formalization of economy by giving social security to the informal sector, which is a good thing, including gig workers and gig platform workers, and financing social security, and specializing the gig economy, and extension of credit to the self-employment people, and investing in the digital infrastructure, giving a thing on green economy. All these are important messages that were put forward in the APRM. FTE, or fixed term employment, a lot of trade unions here have been arguing that FTE are against formalization of employment. So you should know what you mean by fixed term employment, and FTE basically creates a balance between the rights of the employer and the employee. So you should know what are the important aspects of this FTE. So that is a very important article regarding GS paper 3. Moving on, Meaty on the masthead as Bengali scripts bows out Manipuri titles. Please excuse me if I'm pronouncing the script wrong. It's the Meaty Mayak script. So apologies if I'm sounding it wrong. According to January 15, 2023, most Manipuri language newspapers may fail to hit the stands because all 7 vernacular morning newspapers, 9 evening papers, 4 periodical in the tiny hill state of Manipur will have to use only the Meaty Mayak or Manipuri script, replacing the Bengali script in use since the 18th century. So all the newspapers will have to replace the Bengali script, which is actually in use in the 18th century. And according to the history, the Meaty Mayak script dates back to the 6th century and had been used in the 18th century. In 1709, a Hindu missionary named Shantidas Gosai came to Kanglepak, the ancient name for independent kingdom of Manipur, and to spread Vaishnavism. He mesmerized the kings and high officials of the palace and royal orders. All religious and other precious books in Meaty Mayak were incinerated and new ones were written in the Bengali script. So until then, it was very popular. The Manipuri language was included in the 8th schedule of the constitution in 1992, but in Bengali script. So the Meaty Mayak has seen a revival in the 21st century, and a lot of important things is going to come. So this move is a great head. So GS paper 2, something related to governance. This is also an important change in the law. So definitely the people who are aged 30 and above are too old to learn the Meaty script, which means that there will be the low circulation, which can be a problem for the newspapers. Anyway, so this is an important news. A year on, kin of slave villagers await justice in Nagaland. Nothing but GS paper 3, internal security. Last year in Christmas, Indian Army commandos gunned down 6 coal miners in the Nagaland districts after mistaking them for members of an extremist outfit. So this also brings us something called as what is ENPO, or Eastern Nagaland's People Organization, which has been demanding a frontier Nagaland. So read it from internal security perspective. So ENPO has asked the people to hold a black flag protest because the Nagaland government constituted a special investigation team to investigate the charge sheet, but there has been no attempt to prosecute or book the culprits. So that's a sad day for Nagaland, according to the people. So read it from internal. And moving on to the international news, the Tamil MP warns of China Go Home campaign in Sri Lanka, because Sri Lanka is facing a big economic crisis, and China was a big supporter. And if China was a true friend, it would agree to either write off Sri Lanka's debt, which is $7.4 billion debt, or at least help to restructure it, or pay, or help them to restructure it. So China has not done. So the Sri Lankan opposition legislator has said China Go Home campaign, like a Gota Go Home that was used to oust the former president. Gotabaya, that is Gota Go Home, like this China Go Home. And Sri Lanka is getting chances of getting an IMF package depends on the government obtaining adequate financial assurance from its creditors, like China, India, Japanese. And Sri Lanka owes 7.4 billion to China. And India has also pitched in nearly $4 billion this year, becoming the main source of emergency assistance for the dollar strapped island nation. And India and Japan have pledged to support the debt restructure process with the IMF program. And most of Sri Lanka's loans come from the ISB. That brings us, what do you mean by international sovereign bonds? So, a sovereign bond is a debt security issued by a national government to raise money for financing government programs, paying down old debt, paying interest, or any other government spending needs. So, sovereign bonds can be denominated in a foreign currency or the government's domestic currency. So, sovereign bonds are a main source of government financing alongside tax revenue. So, know more about the sovereign bonds. Next is Pakistan's new army chief says his country is ready for a war if attacked. This was something that he said in the line of control, provoking India. So you know that Pakistan has got a new army chief. GS paper 2 international relations. This was all China. China Go Home was also important for GS paper 2 international relations. Turkey jails PKK member extradited from Sweden. This brings us GS paper 2. This brings us an important question. What is the problem of Turkey versus Nordic states? Turkey and Nordic states. And in this regard, what are the Nordic states and what do you mean by PKK or Kurdistan Workers Party? So basically know that Kurdistan Workers Party is a Kurdish militant political organization and armed guerrilla movement which historically operated throughout the Kurdistan but is now primarily based on the mountainous Kurdish majority regions of southeastern Turkey and northern Iraq. Now they are based in southeastern Turkey and northern Iraq, and they are an armed guerrilla movement which is getting support from the Nordic states. And that brings us, what do you mean by a Nordic states? You need to know Nordic countries. So they are nothing but Nordic countries are a geographical and cultural region in the northern Europe and in the North Atlantic region. So their country include countries like Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and the autonomous territory of the Faroe Islands and Greenland, and the autonomous region of Aland under Finland, I guess. So these are the Nordic countries. So Turkey is under the opinion that this Kurdistan Workers Party or PKK, the armed rebellion group, is being funded and it is being supported by the Nordic states. And you know that the Nordic countries, especially Turkey and Hungary, have not ratified the members because after Russia invaded Ukraine, Finland and Sweden in May dropped decades of military non-alignment and wanted to join NATO. And if Finland and Sweden want to join NATO, Turkey and Hungary have to ratify their membership, which they are not doing. Turkey has demanded the Nordic countries to take a tougher stand on Kurdish groups, which they call as terrorist. And if they do that, they will help in ratifying the NATO entry. So know about the issue of Turkish countries and the Nordic states. So GS paper 2 international relations. Next is telecom imports under lens as makers flag Chinese gear. So GS paper 3 economy perspective technology, you should know that the government will devise a methodology to check imports from neighboring nation that are non-compliant with the rules of the telecom sector. So having a lot of gears coming from China which is non-compliant with our own rules and regulations need to be checked. So imports from neighboring countries which are non-compliant needs to be checked. So the minister met with more than 40 CEOs of telecom gear market, so telecom provider or telecom gear markets, and in this they talk about the production linked incentive scheme. What do you mean by a production linked incentive scheme? So you should know that what do you mean by a production link. The PLI scheme is a scheme that aims to give companies incentives on incremental sales from products manufactured in domestic units. So trust is given for products manufactured in domestic units. So a scheme that aims to give companies incentives and increments from domestic products sales. And the scheme also invites foreign companies to set up units in India. However, the aim is to encourage local companies, expand existing manufacturing units, and to generate more employment and cut down the country's reliance on export from other countries. So PLI schemes or production link incentive is basically helping the country to be make in India, like the Atmanirbhar concept, make in India, produce from India, and reduce the import that it's taking from the other countries. And it was launched in 2020, the PLI scheme, and this time the Chinese uh, firms which are we are importing a lot of things from China. So the minister said that India will soon be a exporting nation regarding the telecom gears. So India is actually working on that. And in this regard, you can see that a task force has been formed for 4 to 5 task force have been formed, like creating a component ecosystem regarding a creation of chips. And third task force will develop highly skilled workers in the telecom sector. So in the years to come, for everything from telecom gears to everything that telecom system needs, India will be an exporter soon, is what the minister said. GS paper 3 perspective economy. And next is the pharma sector will touch 130 billion by 2030. It's a good thing. India's pharmaceutical industry is expected to grow at the rate of 12%, and its growth. So Indian pharmaceutical industry is likely to grow and reach 130 billion by 2030. So there is a strong push from the government in creating the required ecosystem for innovation so that India can become a world leader in the pharmaceutical industry. So currently the pharmaceutical industry is valued at 50 billion, uh, 50 billion, out of which almost 25 billion constitutes for the export market. So we need to increase it by 130 billion by 2030. And the industry people have asked the government to set up a separate ministry to for encourage domestic producers and help create pharmaceutical industries to help down the demand, cut down the demand from Chinese imports. So there might be even a pharma ministry coming up. So let's see what happens. So this is regarding GS paper 3 economy. Next is regarding the Russian oil revenues could brave EU ban, the G7 price cap, GS paper 3 economy, and GS paper 2 international relations. This brings us, what do you mean by the G7 countries? The group of G7 countries is an intergovernmental political forum consisting of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, UK, and the United States. And additionally, so Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, and UK and US. Additionally, the European Union is a non-enumerated member. So what is problem? What is the problem? Russian oil output will fall by almost close to a 5 lakh to 1 million barrels per day. So in by 2023, because European Union has imposed a ban on seaborne imports from Russia. If European Union is actually banning Russia from everything, that could really impact the oil. And the West wants to squeeze Russia's ability to fund the conflict. And you know that export of crude, gas, and oil products account for the bulk of Russia's revenue. Without crude, gas, oil products, Russia's revenue is down. So recently, due to the war, it has been affected. And the European Union, which is the biggest buyer, has cut purchases in response to the conflict. And but most, you know what Russia did? European Union was not giving them the required demand. So Russia uh, gave that, diverted that oil supply to Asia. So this could benefit Moscow and other major exporters. And so this is a big problem in the Russian oil market. That what is the impact of Russia and what is the impact of European country? And so this is a serious question that has to be discussed. So these are the most important. So you can see what is the impact of Russian oil on the West, what is G7 countries. So definitely, the more Russian oil that is lost to world markets, the greater the likely impact on prices. That could benefit Moscow and other major exporters and penalize consumers in the West who already face the highest inflation in decades because of energy cost. So that is also not a good solution from the Europeans to not take oil from Russia, because Europe is actually facing highest inflation in decades because of energy cost. So this is a very important article regarding the oil prices regarding the Russian oil. And there are many other important articles of environment and science, like protecting the great Indian bustard, our rhino and elephant conservation efforts a success, cheetahs and tigers. So I'm making a separate video on all of them. You'll get these on current affairs for 2023 exams in separately for environment and science. So I'm not explaining this in this session. So we have come to the end of the session. There were many other important news that we need to learn. So sit back, learn. Subscribe to LearnStroke IAS classes by Arjun. We'll listen more interesting and important news leads for civil service preparation. So subscribe the channel and keep listening.